And of course, always schedule around
Little restaurants.
So
That's okay.
We're going to call this meeting back to order after our lunch session and move right into agenda item 13, service performance updates. And I know we're going to hear from Mr. Latimer, but I'm going to turn it over to our executive director for an update first.
Super. Thank you, Madam Chair. And yes, Jeremy will come up, but earlier today, we shared a lot of good news, and I told you ahead of time that it's not all going to be good news. And I just wanted to preface, look, we've got a lot of projects. We talked about the coordination that has to take place. And what we need to do as an authority is make sure that the momentum that we have earned and the ridership that we have gained, people ride the train not only because they're there, but because they're on time, they're reliable, they're safe, they're a positive experience. And as we move into construction, we want to make sure that all of that continues, even as we've got to make changes. So Jeremy is going to talk about some of the challenges at Union Station with on-time performance, some of the challenges that we've had with Amtrak, getting crews in the right place, locomotives that are perhaps not as available as we'd like them to be. So I just want to take some of the bad news this way and not just say, hey, Jeremy, we're going to throw you to the wolves if you've got all this bad news. The good news is that we watch this closely. Jeremy's talked to you a number of times about the performance committees that meet on a weekly basis, monthly basis, or quarterly basis to look at all of the trains that are not on time, whether they're CSX, VRE, Amtrak, figure out why they weren't on time and look for ways with a no-fault kind of approach to fix them and to improve the system. We're also working very closely with those same partners to figure out what the construction period looks like for Long Bridge and for Fourth Track, because in order to get those projects done by 2030, we're going to see some disruption in the current train service. In fact, Terry will tell you, we currently have 8 state-supported trains. That is likely going to drop to 7 starting in January, with 1 being replaced by a bus. Again, we're finalizing those conversations now. We'll have a final plan for you at the October 7th meeting. VRE folks have been great. Amtrak's been great. CSX has been great. We all know that there's going to be some pain before we get the nirvana of Bridge and all these projects being done. We need to make sure, all of us together, that pain is as minimal as possible and that we don't lose any of the positive momentum that we've had in passenger rail over the next 10 years. So that's our focus every day. Just wanted to preface that what Jeremy has to say with that. And of course, we're happy to have any conversation. So Jeremy, anything I said that offends you? You would tell me if I did. All right, thank you. Jeremy, go ahead.
Okay. So a reminder of what we're looking at going to the Long Bridge pavement construction, and particularly Long Bridge North package is the one that's going to affect our business. The reason we're looking at some truncation and sort of restrictions that we have to work. So because of the District of Columbia's noise and vibration restrictions, there is work on the Long Bridge that cannot be done at night. It has to be done at daytime. So from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And so as we started to look at that window and what that means for our service, we recognize, and especially right now, as people are back to work in DC, the VRA ridership is up. And so we're trying to preserve and protect as much of the ridership as possible, be that VRE or Amtrak. And so we went through with CSX, with Amtrak, VRE, we all kind of looked around several options and landed on a 5-hour window that will go into effect. The exact time is still being negotiated, but somewhere around 8:15-ish. The gates come down, no service going through the Long Bridge. I will talk about exceptions to that in a minute, but the idea is the gates come down at 8:15. The gates come back up at 1 o'clock. We've been talking to Amtrak about this because Amtrak has a host of projects up in 124 too that they're trying to plan for. One of them being in New York, where they have directional flow of their service going in and out at certain times of the day, which complicates when they're going to have trains hit our narrow little window there in white, right? So Amtrak has said before 1 o'clock, a few minutes before 1 o'clock, we're releasing trains southbound to Virginia. So that gate has to come up at 1 o'clock. Trains are on their way already. So it's been a lot of coordination, a lot of work that after we implement. So just as a reminder that we're going to talk about the Virginia State supported service primarily in this. The long distance service is still being negotiated. The VRE service is still being negotiated. But these are the services that the Amtrak Virginia services that we're looking at going from 8 daily round trips to 7 daily round trips, and then putting in some bus services as well. So what's the timeline to when this all starts? So one of the things that we're turning back online, VPRA step up in September, comes back online. The VPRA riders can, for a small fee, get onto an Amtrak train. We'll talk about something about maybe expanding that as we go into the 5 years of construction Long Ridge, but that's a good development to give some flexibility to riders.
Jeremy, Rich, is there anything you want to discuss there with?
I'm just gonna let him get through this, what he says. I'll come back. I'll tell him I think right.
Yeah, maybe already slide from this. So on October 8th is our goal to implement changes in the reservation system. So one of our strategies is not to scare riders away, right? These service is still going to run. So we just want to take the trains out of the system before we will book those trains. So by October 8th, in anticipation of the January changes, we are trying to get all the schedules agreed to with Amtrak 3, get bus routes procured, and get CSX Norfolk Southern sign off so we can make changes to this system. We are also, I'm going to talk about this in more detail. Next slide, looking at mitigation and coordination efforts among the operators. How do we make this customer experience well informed and as positive as possible, and adjust to make sure that we have that customer perspective throughout this time period of 5 years. January 8th is the target date to implement. So the service plan begins for Amtrak and VPRA. Those changes are implemented. And then from that point, from January 8th, we start monitoring and adjusting, because what I try to get people ready for is, like, we want to get it right the first time. Obviously, we're going to do everything we can to get it right, but we need to watch closely and see where we need to tweak this, make sure we're as efficient as possible. Any questions? So I mentioned bus service. So there's kind of two aspects to this. One of them is Amtrak connections, or what some people know as Amtrak Thruway. So this would be that we are looking at adding some buses to target certain markets, especially out of Hampton Roads, and have some of those direct buses off of Washington, D.C., and direct buses from Newport News to Washington, D.C. to those markets. When I say those direct connections, a bus is not going to be an efficient option if it gets off the highway and goes to other stations along the way. We are looking at express routes for these buses. But also, we're going to be looking for the whole system, something we want to coordinate with other agencies and the VPRA, but Amtrak procurement is also looking at ways to enhance our options. Since the pandemic, it has been very difficult to get buses in emergency situations where we want to get riders home by bus. For some reason, buses and drivers disappeared. So we are trying to improve the situation to be able to get those on call and put them quickly to their dispatch for state. So how do we communicate this? Well, there's a lot of ways, a lot to talk about here, but just to kind of break it down into some buckets. So passenger communications. One of the things we're working on with Amtrak is when you purchase your ticket, you get a pre-trip email. There's going to be a lot of changes at different stations. We want to get information to you before you even show up at the station, so you know what to expect. So we are coordinating with Amtrak on what the timelines are for us to get that information secured, or to confirm with project managers that the schedule is staying on schedule, so that we don't put something out there that isn't accurate. And then we also just want general awareness that the schedules are changing. So that's part of it as well. And then when we get the service updates, or the more immediate, so we want text updates to come out. VPRA is very good with this. Their passengers, Amtrak has gotten better at it over recent years, but we want to get text updates out in the moment to let people know what to do. We also want those display systems at the stations, announcements at the stations, and announcements on board to tell people what's going on. And we're looking around the country where some things, like we know in Illinois, they had a Pardon Our Dust campaign where they had some announcements made on the board as you're going to certain areas to say, right now you're going through a construction area that will be an additional track or whatever will increase speeds or capacity. So we're looking at partnering with Amtrak for that sort of approach. And then the public awareness piece. So what you see here is a picture from Washington Union Station where they had, we probably wouldn't do something quite this large, but we want the opportunity to put things in our stations to tell people about the Transforming Rail in Virginia story, so that they're aware in the stations. And then Amtrak, has invested $944 million into the Transforming Rail in Virginia. The Amtrak National Marketing Team, so we kind of have our own marketing efforts that we coordinate with Amtrak National, but we want them to promote awareness of our project as well. They have budgets that buy in bigger markets, people from the Northeast who are coming into DC. And since they're investing so heavily in our program, we feel this is something that they should also be advertising awareness for. So we're wanting to partner with them. VRE is developing their plans as well, and one of the spots I wanted to defer to Mr. Dalton, if you guys.
Sure. So one thing that we're looking at, and probably more than just looking at, we started off with a bunch of different options and stuff, but for example, our service primarily comes out of our southern jurisdictions, in the morning and works our way north. And so if you remember back to the slide where, I think the first slide where Jeremy had that time frame up there, it's a little bit after 8 o'clock. That's about we have our last couple of trains come into Union Station after 9 o'clock. So what we're looking at doing, we'll continue to operate those trains, but we'll truncate them at Alexandria. So in other words, we'll run them up to Alexandria. It'd be approximately the last 2 trains. Run them up to Alexandria and then reverse them back into the recently acquired Seminary Yard and start utilizing that facility and essentially store those trains there. And then we're looking at that we have a midday service, 1 train on both lines that comes out of Washington Union Station in the afternoon. And frankly, it's a key train for us, not necessarily in terms of ridership, but it's sort of that safety valve for people that if they need to get on an early train, sick kid at school, something like that, we need to be able to give them that. So we're working on a creative way to keep that service operating as well. And then of course you see the rest of the timeline there. Same thing, similar to what Jeremy was talking about, communication. Our passengers, they want some sense of predictability, even if it's not the preferred option, if you will. In other words, maybe not for those last 2 trains, a 1-seat ride into Washington Union Station or LaFont, which is actually our busiest station. But if we get out ahead of time, tell them what's going on and communicate with them, then they can adjust to that. And then the other thing I just wanted to, just from a little bit higher level, and DJ touched to most of these points here, but the next 5 years with the projects that are going on in this segment of this corridor, and again, these are projects, you've got CSX constructing track, you've got, VPRA out there managing a new Long Bridge, you've got VRE out there doing station improvements and stuff like that. We cannot underscore enough, the safety aspect of it. We're going to have folks up and down this 8-mile corridor, 8-mile bridge out in the right of way working, and we need to give them a safe working window there as well. So I just wanted to emphasize that this is, just kind of imagine that if the focus wasn't there, and the focus is there from the safety perspective, but if it wasn't, to go over the next 3 to 4 to 5 years and have safety issues out there, that would not bode well for any of our collective organizations. So I think this is very smart. This is something that needs to be done. But I'm going to emphasize again, go back to what Jeremy said, but we've got to continue to coordinate, collaborate, and communicate. So I'm sure there's some marketing line in there that I just came up with. I don't know. But we have to do that. So by the time we get to the other end of this, back in the, in the 2030-ish timeframe or whatever, we not only have the infrastructure out there, but we haven't lost all of our passengers. We haven't lost the business. So there you have it.
I think for VRE's part, yes, the shuttle train returning back to Virginia, sending less trains in the Union Station is a very big piece of it. For Virginia State supported service, schedule changes and reducing by 1 for long distance service. Amtrak is taking some pain on that as well, because they are having to change those schedules, which have changed considerably in some cases where the markets for their furthest reaches of longer routes are changing too. So it's changing the passenger ridership revenue. So everybody's taking some pain in this, but everybody and Ian and the Longbridge team has done, and Charlene and that whole team, we went up to Amtrak because there was some initial, does it have to be this disruptive, right? We had to do our homework and convince them. And they had their engineers there and they have bought in, and that's why they're working on the schedule. This, they understand the approach and what we have to do.
Can I ask a question? And maybe it's for Rich. You're gonna end some VRE trains in Alexandria. Are you working with WMATA?
I'm sorry.
Are you working with WMATA? Are they just gonna take the train in? And doesn't WMATA have a line over? Long
Yes, and I
River?
should have brought that up, but yeah, that's one of the reasons why we, as we modeled this, one of the reasons why it makes sense to just go ahead and truncate those couple of trains in Alexandria is because there is, the King Street station right there for WMATA. Still exploring some ideas as far as, how to cross honor them, if that's important. In other words, how to get them onto, WMATA from a fare perspective, how to make that a little bit more transparent. That might not, there's actually a couple ideas, but that hasn't been solidified. That might be something coming soon after this starts, but we are working on that as well.
And for those that aren't aware, you can get off right at Alexandria, walk 50 yards to the King Street station, get on the yellow line, and it takes you right to the Font, which is Rich's busiest station. So
And nothing is changing. They have relined. WMATA is aligned over the Potomac River right there too. That's completely out of scope, not gonna be affected in any way.
that's correct.
How's that gonna work for ticketing? They'll buy their Amtrak ticket to Alexandria and then they'll buy your ticket? Is that how it will work?
Well, no, so the only trains that are being truncated in Alexandria are the VRE trains.
Right, well, that's what I mean. Okay,
So currently they'll have a VRE ticket and then they'll have to get a Metro.
all right, so there's no,
We've had conversations about ways that perhaps we can
So-
make that more seamless.
Exactly.
greatly be increasing your business too,
It's,
maybe.
again, best case, it increases all of our business simply because, we're being predictable about what we're doing, right? It'll be a little bit of an interruption. And I think for people that know VRE passengers are looking over at a couple of VRE passengers in the room. They're very much creatures of habit. And so we got to get through that. We got to get through that mindset. There's going to be a little bit of a change. Hopefully, we provide you something that works for you, and then you make adjustments, we'll make adjustments, and we'll go get the work done.
But to that point, tell me you're exactly correct. If someone currently is used to going into DC every morning on a train, on an Amtrak train, a Virginia Amtrak train, that goes right through that construction window. And if that train's going to go away for this short period of time, if they're a Fredericksburg person, they very well may get on a Fredericksburg VRE train instead. And they want to have the cafe car, but they'll stop in Alexandria and then get on the Metro and go forth.
Right, so they'll buy an Amtrak ticket to Alexandria
Well, so then they
only.
buy the VRE
So
ticket.
Amtrak will lose some money. You may pick up some ridership going in.
In that case, that's exactly right.
So make this even more complicated is if Jeremy go to the slide where you showed the step up ticket, since we're kind of talking about that. Yeah, so previous to COVID, we had a cross owner agreement with Amtrak. So VRE passengers that have multi-ride tickets for a small fee, if you will, can purchase a step up ticket and ride on an Amtrak train. Typically in our service area, they're used as more express trains. So the folks in Fredericksburg, very popular to get on a couple of these, Amtrak trains that are going through the territory at the time. So it's very key that we're reinstating that program with Amtrak. In fact, while we were sitting here, I just got the final letter agreement. So hopefully we can do that as early as next week. So a lot of different things happening, give people some choices, some options. And with the mindset, and I want to say, while we've been discussing this for the last several months, we've tried to stay focused on how can we best, given the construction windows out there, how can we best just simply move people? How can we move people? It's not about moving trains here. It's about moving people. And just like a lot of us wear different hats, we're going to probably ask our passengers to wear slightly different or a few different hats in some circumstances as well. So I'm excited.
I mean, I just had a quick question about, we're not in 2026 on this map.
Oh, that should say January twenty twenty.
Yeah, Jim.
Yeah, but even like early, or further on into the year, we have some major events on year 2026. We know we talked about America 250. Are we planning to actually think about, hey, does it actually make sense to either reduce work or stop work so that we can actually get up to even peak or even enhance service during those windows? Because we know that we're going to have a lot of even one-time only VPRA passengers during that peak season. Do we have any kind of plans around that?
We worked with Amtrak on this. What we found is because we did an analysis of several years of ridership boom and bust periods, right? And wanted to try and preserve service. To bring people back and bring trains back for shorter amounts of time was very difficult and probably going to be inconsistent.
Okay.
We did get them to agree to the peak times around the holidays, the end of the year, when we're also going to stop work, and because CSX also has very traffic.
Yeah.
Also, it'll primarily, but
When you say stop work that follows the tracks.
definitely on track.
Yeah.
And now, someone work can continue, Ian's over there not incorrect, so it's not like no work's happening for.
Yeah.
It's stop works that follows the track.
But we will be, yes, resuming full service for the holiday period. And so I guess that, yeah, there's so much to think about with all this.
Mhm.
I would say when it comes to, you know, the Virginia 250 and what's coming, kind of the culmination of what's already underway. And then we have, you know, Easter and spring break and all other times of the year where we see peak ridership. We work with Amtrak every 2 weeks on ridership and revenues. And so we kind of have these charts by route that we look at. We lean heavy, we need more riders. We're trying to balance this. We lean heavy towards revenue because we think we can start seeing peak ridership. You know, so we don't want to give away revenue. But we also are very aware that the challenge this coming year is to shift people who might have taken the trains that are not operating, shift them to other trains or to the bus options. So we're going to be pricing appropriately to try to preserve and capture service or ridership.
Jeremy, can you go to the next slide? So you can explain some of that. So this is one train out of Norfolk, going up, coming back, and one train out of Newport News, total of 2
Newport
trains.
Will stay at the same service level. Only Norfolk will be affected, but we're looking at capturing more riders with buses that are express. So we'd be adding, Newport News would stay where it is, but we would add the bus service as well.
So as of January 8th, there would be 2 trains to Norfolk and there would be 2 trains to Newport News. And then there'd be 1 bus to each of them. So only 1 train is going away. We're going from 8 state-supported trains to 7 is the plan.
Well, that's what I heard, 8 to 7. So it's only one train. So it's only the Norfolk train
One
that's
of
going
Norfolk.
away.
Yes.
And it will be have you really looked? I need to explain back home why you made this decision. So, and it was surprising to me to just learn it last week. This was all happening. And so I'm still trying to get my brain around it. But so now that this is a public meeting and you're talking about all of this, you'll be talking about it now so that people can adjust, not be surprised.
Right. We're finalizing the plans now with VPRA, with Amtrak. We are going to make sure that by the next board meeting and by the 8th, October 8th, when this would become real in the reservation system, that we meet with all the local leaders, that we make sure that no.
Prior to the 8th,
Yeah, it's not that day, weeks before that.
weeks before that. Does Secretary Miller know about this?
We have briefed Secretary Miller on multiple occasions at a high level on this. And then after this meeting, we're briefing him.
That was a big deal in Norfolk to get train service after not having train service in 72. So it's going to be a big deal, even though it's just one train now. I thought it was going to be 2 trains, one out of Newport News and one out of Norfolk. So Newport News is okay. Is there any way to shift that Norfolk train so that it leaves, or give people the option, let them weigh in how they'd like to see it? Would they like to leave earlier in the morning and still have their train service?
So there's under the current schedule, which isn't final, there's a 4:30 in the morning train that leaves from Newport News. And when we looked at it, it didn't make sense to have a 4 o'clock train and a 4:30 from the same area. Really, any train that was going through that work window in that period, we had to look at either moving or substituting with a bus. And, you know, the VPRA ridership is big. They're taking a big hit stopping in Alexandria. when we looked at it, it didn't make sense to move another Norfolk train earlier. It made more sense to, during a time of the day when people wanted to ride, to put a bus in there that, I want to say conveniently, but we planned it this way, that would be able to take advantage of the hot lanes going north. So it would still be time competitive. As we've talked about, you get to Fredericksburg, you could be there for a long time. We don't want to, we don't want to put people on a bus that's incredibly unreliable. And so that's part of what went into all these schedule decisions.
And Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel is one of the
Exactly.
components. But if it's early in the morning, it's going to be less problem than if it's.
That's the plan. And that's why 3 months into it, we look at it and say, okay, this isn't working as well as we thought. Or here are the results. Here's what we need to tweak to make it even better.
So when you talked about it being an express bus, so that bus won't stop in Richmond, or there are going to be a few places it will stop? All the way through. Okay. Yeah, so I think the most important thing is you need to show how hard you worked to save that train. And you need to be out there letting people know that this is coming and it not be a surprise.
That's our plan.
You know, going through again, the awareness campaign, very important, right? Just in the stations, on social media, asking Amtrak to help us promote our, not just relying on our Amtrak Virginia accounts, but Amtrak national accounts, Amtrak advertisements, wherever we can encounter folks who would ride our trains. So I wanted to go over, we're doing a lot of mitigation and communication planning. We do want to have contingency plans because as we go through in a minute of our service performance, we have room for improvement, and we're only going to make that harder for families. So we need to be ready for what that means. We need to be ready to say, if the VRES schedule is always an option, we don't want to implement that option, but we know there's a fallback plan to reduce service. If for some reason Union Station can't handle all this, or Long Bridge, if something happens, we're asking Amtrak to come up with that as well. Cross honoring, something that we're talking about that's different than VRE Step Up. One of the things VRE Step Up has done, though, is get Amtrak to digital. It's now digital, right? You don't have to do a paper ticket anymore. So there is this ability for 2 hours before the train departs to turn on the ability for people from VRE to reserve a ticket on the train. More capability now to implement this because of the new way that it's done. So we want to try and make that work. That I think I have a slide on that. No. So if you're going to Fredericksburg from Washington, D.C., you can take an Amtrak train. That could be a Virginia train. That could be a North Carolina train. That could be a long distance train, or it could be a VRE. So it's not just about VRE getting on Amtrak. If Amtrak could get on VRE to get home, we want that to be able to work as well. And so then, of course, we would also open deadheads. So we have some cars that are not in operation on our service because we would have to have more conductors, but we are looking at opening those cars as we try to shift and price appropriately to get people to take the train that is still in service. And then I'm going to go in a little bit about service performance monitoring piece of this that we are working on with our consultant team. So this shows the Fort track, Long Bridge North, which is the most disruptive project to service, Alexandria Fort track, Franklin, all of the projects that we have that are entering construction from 2025 to 2028. And what you see in red there circled is the summer of 2027. The summer of 2027, just about every project is under construction, but every project is also shifting its construction phase, which means that things are going to be changing. Certain tracks come out of service, certain platforms come out of service. So there's a lot to track here. So we want to stay informed with the project teams because those little white lines in the red box can move depending on how construction goes. They find something or they stay ahead of schedule, whatever the case may be. So watching this through the entire 5 years of Long Bridge construction, well, we're looking at the entire corridor holistically. So this might be a little hard to see, but what we're looking at is out the Alexandria corridor. So you can Alexandria Station, Crystal City, CSX Long Bridge up to La Fana. And this is Alexandria corridor phase 4C of construction. You don't have to know all the different phases. All you just need to know is by this phase of construction, if you're familiar with Alexandria Station, you usually board on track 3 next to the station building, or you cross the tracks over to the other side. Both of those platforms are out of service. Both those tracks are out of service. So we're concerned about riders showing up at the last minute and all of a sudden everything's changed, right? And there's going to be temporary platforms on the other tracks now And so we need to get those pre-trip emails out there. We need to get text updates out there. We need awareness in the stations for regular riders. We need all these things to be firing on all their cylinders so that we can keep customers informed. The other thing is VRE is looking at some things like, you would have a shuttle train coming out of Union Station. If you're a VRE rider, get on this train. We'll get to Alexandria. You'll shuffle trains once you're down there. What we need to make sure is that operation still works with a smaller temporary platform so that we get down there, we don't have a platform big enough for one train. So there's a lot of logistics to think through every stage of construction for every project. And that's what we're trying. We're going to do our best to not miss anything. Any questions before I jump into on-time performance?
I have a quick question. It sounds like we have a plan in place to provide regular updates and be really transparent about the actual work that's coming. But are we also finding a way to communicate that the end result, to let customers know that, no different than any road construction project. There's a little pain while there's road construction, but it's going to be worth it in the end because this is what you're going to get. Are we making sure that we keep those customers excited about the future?
I don't want to speak for Jared, but that is the goal of some of those materials about awareness.
Okay.
This is coming, but this is exciting because it's going to be better. Anything left?
Yeah, we're connecting it to Transforming Rail in Virginia. We're repurposing some of the videos we saw today and showing them the construction work that's happening. So integrating our communications that we're doing to folks who were disrupting their neighborhoods, some of that same communication, like you'll experience a little pain, you hear a little noise, the schedule is changing. So not emphasizing the schedule differences, but saying the schedule is changing, but ultimately this is what you're getting, a better high quality, high performance rail service, and then showing that for the next 5 years. So
With 13 round
Thank
trips
you.
a day.
Right. Perfect.
that's it.
Okay. Thank you.
Plus more VRE trains.
More theories.
And before June moves on, back in May and June, we briefed the board on Long Bridge pricing and phase 2 of the agreements for Long Bridge North to transfer Flatiron. Michael Westbrook is probably asking me every day, where do we stand with work windows? As he is negotiating the Long Bridge North contract, where do we stand with work windows? Because without that 5-hour work window, the schedule and the cost would have been much further to the right in a bad way. So it was very important that, so he was working with the negotiating team, I'm working with Jeremy, we're working with CSX and Amtrak and VRE to get that work window. Otherwise, instead of the 2030 Long Bridge date, the contractor might very well add it a couple of years out. Also might have added, we had our low and our high for Long Bridge that we showed the board, much like we did for the Ford track in the closed session earlier. It would have been beyond the high number if we didn't have a work window. It's very important to them, to Skanska Flatiron, to have that work window, because keep in mind, Rich, you mentioned safety reasons. If you have a potential to follow a track, you can't have a train through if you have potential to follow a track. And if we have to keep moving the equipment away, we're never going to get that job done. So you have other tracks that might be out of service, but the tracks that need to have the train go through, again, potential to follow incorrect means something overhanging it or even close to it. You have to be quite many feet away from that track. So I just wanted to emphasize that all the work that was done to get to that June board budget decision for FY26 was predicated on the work windows that Jeremy and team have been working on. Because without it, those cost estimates would not have been afforded.
It's a good thing to also, I mentioned this earlier, you just reminded me that, if a train shows up extremely late, which is some of the concern of our longer distance trains that Amtrak runs, it's not going to have to wait 5 hours. Right? We're going to have to let it through. So there is going to be that cost, but there's some of that allowance built into the system. We don't want that every day, but we have to be realistic. Okay, so that's a good segue into on-time performance, because obviously this is not going to be easy. And so how are we doing today? So actually this one's from May, but the VRE performance is still similar. So on-time performance for VRE is about 79% in July. And there have been terminal issues, terminal congestion in Washington Union Station. There have been slow orders because CSX is maintaining the right of way. That has actually been wrapping up in the last couple of months, so that should be getting better. And then I'm going to talk more about heat orders. Is there anything you want to say about VPRA service?
Just, obviously, we're in a different place currently, and a different place on a positive note. And DJ mentioned, activation of track 22. That was huge for us collectively, Amtrak and VRE. So that just opened up at the beginning of August. I'm not going to say the number or anything, but we only have a few more days left in August operating, and I don't know, we're about 10 points above
Say the number.
the number that you're saying there. So I'm not saying the number.
The dotted line is the.
Yeah, we're getting closer to it. My point is, that was huge. That was huge. We're seeing where terminal operations, the congestion, albeit there's still some congestion, but having that additional capacity in the form of not just the rail, but the platform, it's early, but we're seeing positive effect of that. So it's not all negative information, but for us, that number is unacceptable. We can't stay in business with numbers that are that low. You've heard me say that before. So every little bit helps.
And just to make sure everybody's reminded, like the red is for the delay on the Fredericksburg line, the blue, the delay Manassas line. We're looking at the top 10 delays. We're looking at, and this is what our service performance committees are focusing on. We're not looking for one-offs. There was something that happened today that doesn't happen regularly, that we want to be prepared for after learning experiences, but we're looking for the frequent and the impactful. So we look for what's happening frequently and what is the impact. And so, and then red again, Fredericksburg, how Fredericksburg line is doing versus the Manassas line. So that's that chart in a nutshell. So moving on to the Virginia State Supported Service or the Amtrak Regional Services. So we are, you can see the line, we're down to 52.6% on all station on-time performance, which looks at trains arriving, not the percentage of the customers. But that's about where we were this time last year. This is kind of our summer slump. There's a lot of construction that happens in summer. There's a lot of heat orders, a lot of things, but I'm going to talk about some other challenges as well. When you look at over on the right-hand side, the trains that are performing the best, those are usually those morning northbound trains before we have any of the heat of the day slowing things down. And then the congestion in Union Station starts to build throughout the day. And then we also have the heat orders in the later parts of the day. And so the trains in the southbound or the afternoon trains tend to perform much worse. Just as a reminder for everybody, heat orders. So every railroad has a heat order policy, but CSX's is one of the more conservative ones. And so if the temperature reaches about 85 degrees, they can slow the trains down. If the ambient temperature or the rails reach 110 degrees, they can slow things down. If there's a temperature swing of 40 degrees, say in the shoulder season, spring or fall, they can also slow things down. So when CSX implements a heat order, it goes into effect from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m., which means from that time forward, our schedule is not going to be achieved. And I will go over how frequent that happens in the summertime on the eastern side of the state. Norfolk Southern has a much less conservative heat order policy, but I will say in June and July, towards the end of the months, we had extremely hot days, and Norfolk Southern, who doesn't usually put in heat orders the way CSX does, did. And it slowed things down drastically, like to 25 miles per hour for the 3 days that happened in both June and the 3 days in July. So looking at the long distance trains, long distance, they have more opportunities to have their service interrupted or messed up. So they typically perform worse than our shorter Virginia trains, Virginia routes, but long distance, about 34% in July, all station on-time performance. And then we rank the long distance trains. These are the ones that are not Virginia trains. The one that we have started to really focus on with Amtrak is Floridian. Floridian replaced the Silver Star. So it goes from Florida, it used to go up to the Northeast Corridor. Because of construction in the Northeast Corridor, they actually shifted that route over to Chicago, became the Floridian for the time being. The interesting thing about the Floridian that we really want to understand, because long route, there's a lot happening to it, but they have a lot of cushion built in at Union Station. They keep it on diesel the whole time, so it does not have an engine switch like all of our other trains, yet it still comes into Virginia extremely late. So we need to understand what's going on there. This train is one of the poorest performers. As a matter of fact, the first time it was on time in its entire existence, everybody celebrated. It hasn't done this since. So Union Station, I want to talk about. So Union Station is like, I think I've asked before, is when you think about what is the major challenge for on-time performance in Virginia, typically people say freight interference. And it is responsible for a lot, but it is actually not the most important one. And we're looking at the trend, the data, it told us actually it's coming out of Union Station. Amtrak control Union Station has been our challenge. And so you can see last summer, and this is about to fall off the chart, but this was a long period before leading up to July 2024, where we started to see in the data that Union Station is not functioning well. And you're sending like trains into Virginia extremely late, and that includes VRE. And so we really started working with Amtrak on this, and they came up with a hiring plan. They had a crew shortage. They still have engine change issues. There's a lot of things going on at Union Station. If you ever get up there in the summertime and just spend some time in the afternoon on the platform, it is chaos. But they implemented a plan. We started to see those delays come down significantly very quickly over the months. So you see July 2024, we peaked at 4,500 minutes. And by November, we were down to 1,000. And it has oscillated a little bit up and down, but it has not gone back up to where it is. We want to continuous improvement at Amtrak to try and push that down even further, because that means a lot for us to change strategy. If we can expect trains coming out of Union Station on time into Virginia, now we can lean more heavily on CSX and Norfolk Southern to make sure that those trains get the rest of the way on time. I will say crew issues have popped up. So there was a shortage of crew issues in July. Servicing is just getting the train ready to get out the door. There's been some delays changing the engines, ready and getting them into the station from the yard. We have seen an uptick in mechanical issues, and I don't know, I think there's some folks who experienced some delays due to this, but Amtrak is aware, and this came up at their Amtrak board meeting recently. They are running on an aging fleet, and the issues are becoming more numerous and more impactful. So Amtrak is working on a fleet management plan. They're working on answering some questions for the operator, for the states that are contracting with them for operations. But this is a problem we need to get a handle on, because when it happens, it can be very disruptive. And then, you know, when we talk about Amtrak and this congestion at Union Station, one of those who are affected significantly is VPRA, especially if it goes on. So looking at the top line, the Fredericksburg trains, you can see that earlier in the day, 1300, 1 o'clock, doing well, but then going into the afternoon, you can start to see that the late departures in red. You can even start to see some of the cancellations for short terms happening in gray. Same thing for the Manassas line trains. As you go throughout the day, it's getting worse. Rich, is there anything you wanted to add here?
Pretty much tells the story right there.
And then there are times where you will just not send trains into Union Station because there are trains being held outside Union Station because
Short term the trains. I mean, there's no sense of adding to the congestion. And I guess one thing I will just mention that where Jeremy, you mentioned the Floridian 40 and 41, you know, that is a abnormally long train. And when it gets stuck in Washington Union Terminal for any extended period of time, and for some reason, it always gets stuck in the afternoon in that terminal. So it's not easy for them to deal with or manage. So any way we can get that pushed out, you know, well, actually, if those trains could operate on time, everything would be just perfect. So I amend what I was about to say.
I'm going to talk a little bit more about heat orders and weather. So we've been tracking this because we've been adjusting the schedule in the summertime to try and mitigate the impact of the hot days, especially on the border between Richmond and Washington, D.C. So as you can see, if you look at June and July, and the red is 2025 delays, it's actually not been as many heat order days as there was last year, which I guess is good news. But we did have really hot days that were really disruptive to service, and so hot that it affected the Norfolk Southern side, which we have not actively been tracking, though we are starting that now. And so, you know, even having a few days can be very disruptive to service and hurt overall on time. These charts I know are very busy, so let's go through one by one. But on the left side are the days that we've seen heat orders. So if it's in the orange, either the minor where we had a few heat orders reported, or we had frequent heat order delays reported on our trains, you can see the number of days starting in June all the way through to the end of July. A lot of them, a lot of people, right? The days that we have where they're from 1 o'clock to 7 o'clock, there's no chance of our schedule. So that's why we added time. And you can see the on the right-hand side, you can see the by train, and we don't necessarily have to worry about where these trains fit, except that they were operating during the heat order times. And you can see the bar chart shows the delays incurred, the heat orders, and the diamond is the amount of time we built into the schedule. So the intent was not to completely wipe out heat orders, because at that point, we're just slowing the train down to a ridiculous amount. There are other delays. And if you have a day where it's cooler, like this August has been extremely cool, heat order schedules are still in place. So there are going to be days where you see probably that, like train 94 there, where the diamond is beyond the delays. And we don't want trains just sitting around. Right, we don't want to, we're trying to find a balance here. We're not slowing them down too much, but we're trying to absorb some of the heat orders that we're expecting based on the data from the past few years. So we will do an assessment of this after September and report back on how we did and adjust accordingly. Any questions on performance? A little less chart heavy. Sorry.
I want to ask this question before. The dual trip locomotives, both electric and diesel, I've heard that they've been ordered.
Yes.
What do they do?
So they have been ordered. The first one, I think a month ago, came off the assembly line and went to the northeast border for testing. The first ones are promised to the Pacific Northwest. So we are expecting to see them start showing up in Virginia in 2027.
27.
And so the benefit will be that you don't have to do an engine change once those come up.
So that'll significantly reduce congestion up there.
Yes. So customer service standards.
We get it. We're one, right? We're going to have full service.
Clear, all of our trains eventually will switch over to these new aero trains. They'll have that dual mode and also be push-pull. So if there's issues coming into stations or something, they sure they don't have to do a full turnaround. But push-pull and dual mode, Jeremy mentioned maybe they'll come in phased in approach. I'm not sure how that's going to.
Right, that's definitely.
That's a good idea. That's going to be a big deal, not only because it gets rid of the dwell time at the long dwell time in your station. 45 minutes, they still get to take 20, 25 minutes to get people on and off. But you can't get rid of that uncertainty when they have trouble connecting or disconnecting the diesel engine, as often happens, as Jeremy showed. That's some of the delay in the station. They have trouble with that engine coming on and off. So that's really going to help when those come up.
Who's building it? Siemens?
Siemens. Yeah.
Yes, it's actually a big topic. The good news is because there is old equipment that is having reliability issues, and there are states that need newer equipment. Like we're running the entire nation on aging equipment. The good news in Virginia is that we negotiated for that first order, which is funded, procured, and in production. It will serve all 13 round trips that we have in our fleet.
How many manufacturers are there of these engines?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's a big challenge here because we, over the last 4 decades as a country, have not ordered consistently passenger fleet. And so we have not made as a country the investment that would get folks to come in and put facilities in. Basically, you've got Alstom, you've got Stadler, no relationship, and then you've got Siemens. Those are the 3 big ones. And they have, but for the last decade, not seen a whole lot of business. I mean, a lot of that has grown just in the last.
Even this first procurement, they had to build a factory in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And so we don't really have the industry or the supply chain as part of the issue we're having now. With newer locomotives coming online, there are issues. We have to get parts from overseas. And so there's been delays in keeping the new stuff in circulation as well. So I could talk about that for a long time, but we're going to move to customer service standards. So as part of the Transforming Rail in Virginia agreement with Amtrak, where they invested $944 million in the program, they have exclusivity on Amtrak Virginia services to be the provider, the operator. But we also negotiated that we get to have a customer service standards agreement where they have to live up to certain standards or there are penalties, or ultimately that exclusivity can be taken away. So that program is in its grace period, and as of October 1st will become live. So we've been doing a lot of work here, and what we want to emphasize with this program is it's not intended to be a punishment program or a gotcha program with the inspectors. We have full-time inspector Brian Sawyer, who's up in Union Station today, but we capture the positives because this has become a big deal for the Amtrak employees to feel good about themselves, to know that we're out there, to not fear us. We want them to know that when we're on the train, we're not trying to hide from them. But we also want there to be some rewarding and pride in operating the service in Virginia. And we have heard some interesting stories about like when they cross into Virginia, we've heard some of the countries from Virginia, they're a little stricter. So they know. And we've done a real good job socializing the program, making sure everybody's aware. So we have 17 standards in our program. And where we started with this program wasn't to create new standards. We actually went to the Amtrak, it's called the Blue Book. And we said, what are your standards for yourself? Because they're actually already really high standards. Problem is the accountability piece. So we negotiated, made sure that they were good with the language, that the managers were on board with what we were doing. And so as we started to track this in the grace period, we're not live yet until October 1st, what we started to see is as you go from 2024 down to 2025, you'll see more green, right? What that means is they were not compliant in a lot of the categories initially, but they're starting to become compliant. There are two that are still not compliant, but this bar chart here on the right-hand side shows significant progress over the past year on them attaining their own standards. They are now at the point where just 2 of their own standards are not achieved, whereas they started with only, I think, 3 or 4 compliant when we started the grace period. So there's been a real big change. I want to get it all the way to 100%, but this has been a great program success so far.
And Jeremy, if I can, I know it's hard to read because it's hard to put on a PowerPoint because it's long. So these items are such as Wi-Fi compatibility, the PA system, cleanliness, how many staff use the cafe cars, which was a problem a few years ago. It's hard to find a cafe car. We've limited that, things of that nature. So again, is there online? I know it's hard to read. I actually have to turn my head to read them. But I will say, DJ, when we met with VPRA, they heard that we had some standards. They said, how did you get that?
They heard that we had standards with Amtrak.
With Amtrak.
They knew we had that up.
But they're very impressed. And we're asking if other states are going to follow us. And the answer is Jeremy does present on this at his various committees. He's on the national level. And this is a model to follow. And VPRA is very happy to hear that we have these standards. We have people out there enforcing them.
And Amtrak came into this candidly very nervous about what it was going to do because they're concerned that they're going to get low scores, but their crews have embraced it. Gary Williams, who's the chief operating officer there, and I co-signed a letter that said, look, we're not here to get people in trouble. We're here to make sure that the passengers are getting the experience that they deserve. And crews have really stepped up and said, you know what? I want to make sure my numbers on my train are in the green there. And that's a huge win for Amtrak, for us, and most importantly for the passenger.
I think, one of the anecdotes I like to tell, there's a lot of them, but Wi-Fi. It's nothing more frustrating than trying to get on the Wi-Fi and finding a trip. But what we found is, we've learned a lot about how they're upgrading the Wi-Fi systems. We've also gone outside of that. It kind of led us down a path of just coordinating with some of the providers out there and just talking to them, letting them know that this is a concern. There were some improvements already because they admitted to us, we've always been dangling our antennas out towards the neighborhoods. So if we just make certain tweaks, and this is like, we're not investing anything, we're not getting grant funds for this sort of thing yet. They've already improved certain areas of Virginia for that reception because Amtrak has invested so that there's that antenna that is searching for AT&T or Verizon or whoever's in the area to pull that signal in and distribute it better through the train. Our inspector is then on the train checking speeds and checking it from front to back if it's working. When he's having times where it's not working, he's been able to report that to the conductor on board. They try to reset it. Sometimes that works, but sometimes it didn't. And so then he helps them because they're busy managing it. He reports it to Amtrak, and we've been able to remotely reboot the system and get it fixed from the central office up in the Northeast. And they've also marked those cars that have signal problems so that when they get up to the Northeast, they inspect them to make sure everything's fixed. So that's just like one example of like one standard where we're trying to improve that reliability and that customer experience. And then I talked a bit about the kids effort, but I think this one just merits talking again about that. We have greatly improved the information at Richmond Main Street, Staples Mill Station, Ashland, especially the safety, so that people don't wait in the middle of the tracks, and then Fredericksburg as well. And someday when there are other stations at Blanco, it's going to be upgraded to a new We'll also dispatch or change the system from Staples Mill Station. That's what the crews are there in the upper right-hand corner, the crews being trained. They have, I think that's 6 monitors there. It's up to 8 monitors now. And they're watching from the cameras, and they're making announcements if they see people on the side as well. They're making sure that people get to the right side with as much time as they can. And they're watching for if the trains are departing late. Then they're watching for when CSX might shift them from one track to the next. If it says track 3 and then it's on its way from Richmond to Ashland and it switched tracks, then they update that as quickly as they can. Their goal is to have it 10 minutes before the train arrives. So this has been a really great effort. But as I mentioned before, we don't see this as a long-term solution because it's a nationwide problem. But we are learning how complex it is. I will say that Alexandria Station remains a puzzle to be solved. This is something that we have been meeting on site with Amtrak. We had 2 days of observations just so they could see the confusion of the board saying something like train 95 now arriving, and people are like, wait a minute, is that my train? And then it says departing automatically, and they're like, oh, maybe it is my train. I need to get on this train, but they were supposed to get on here or something like that. Like, there's a lot of confusion every day, every afternoon for all these customers, and we really need to fix that. So Amtrak met with us at our board meeting, and we are going to continue to pursue this at Alexandria Station, especially as we enter the construction phase and potential for even more confusion. Questions?
Jeremy, for Alexandria, stuff like this is like, at what point do we tell, like, do station staff just get involved, and are they getting involved, or is it like, at what point can, while we're thinking about technological upgrades, good old fashioned elbow grease from asking station staff to be like, hey, all right, I get that this is wrong. Let me go and walk the platforms to let customers know, or go in the waiting area.
So this is where we ended up with the 3 conditions at a station now, because I'll give an example. July 29th, we went back out to Alexandria to watch. One of the things we saw is like we had trains coming in, northbound, one train coming in southbound. The staff of the station had to go to open doors and meet the train and help people get on the train, help luggage, so people with special needs. So there was nobody to update the bids. And as we're watching this, and everybody was on it, everybody's working hard. They knew we were there, so they were working. they were on it, and they usually are. But then a lady came out of the station and said, "I need to change my ticket. There's nobody left over here." Right. So they are constantly oversubscribed, and you add every trains out of sync, and customers confused and getting irritated, especially I know it was really hot those days. Like, it's just a very hard situation for the Amtrak staff. So that's, when we looked at that at Staples Mill and looked at the number of stations that need the accuracy, we tried with Alexandria from Union Station, but Union Station is in itself its own universe. So that didn't work. And looking at it from Staples Mill, they taking on so many stations can't commit to something as complex as Alexandria either. So we've got to solve that riddle.
The other question I had, maybe for Mike, is that as we put in new infrastructure, does the new infrastructure we're putting in have greater climate tolerance, or like heat tolerance, so that like eventually our heat order days will come down as we like put in new stuff, new locomotives, train sets like that? Can we be able to bring those into a smaller tolerance?
It's more dependent on the rails.
Yeah, we don't make that policy. It's TSX.
Average of steel.
Short answer is no. The new equipment will not necessarily help that.
No, but it's the class of track to which you maintain it. You can maintain it to a higher, much more expensive level. I mean, when you get heat orders on the Northeast Corridor, for example, you're not slowing down at 25 miles an hour, but you're slowing down significantly. It's based on track class. The equipment doesn't really do that. It gives you a smoother ride.
The new infrastructure, when Patty and I talked about this during the break, it is going to allow for more flexibility for dispatching. I mentioned island platforms along Crystal City, and adding the 4-track, and we talked about the Alexandria area. That's going to allow for more flexibility for dispatchers to having more capacity, to give more options, and to bring a train into. I was asking, why does her southbound train come in at the station? It's because the VPRA train going north, she often takes a train from south and north. The VPRA train going north has to get over to L'Enfant. They only have one option, which is the west platform. But when Richmond team put it in that island platform, it'll have 2 options. So maybe Pat, I hope you don't mind using an example, but it is a great example of the flexibility it'll provide when we add the infrastructure we talked about earlier, that it'll help with some of these problems, not gonna help with all of them. Again, the heat orders, there's only so much we can do, but we'll provide some more flexibility in the future.
Thank you, Jeremy. Well,
Say,
sure.
kudos to whoever came up with this system, for setting up standards. The rail systems, passenger rail for a long time has not fully realized that they're competing with every other transportation system for the traveling dollar. And those standards will make a difference long run in bringing people to rails.
As part of our agreements back in 2021 with Amtrak, as part of the larger CSX agreements. And they institute those.
Step in the right direction.
I agree. I thought an excellent presentation, Jeremy. Thank you.
And Jeremy, I would just add, as you are presenting nationwide, we, as a board, I think would love to hear about that and be updated. So we're aware, because we also want to help spread the message in Virginia of the national standards and model we've created here. Thank you. So with that, we will move to our last item, which is our FY26 organizational goals. And I will let you, DJ, kick that off.
Super. Thanks very much. So at the end of every year, we take a look at how we did last year. And then we, as an executive team, and really more importantly, as an organization, look at what will success look like a year from now if we do everything we want. And it's for the old adage, what gets measured gets done. And so these are goals that we look at every month, we talk about. We want to make sure that as time passes, and the days are long, but the years are short, as time passes, that we are doing what we are here to do. 2030 is a big date, getting Long Bridge done, but there are a lot of things that need to fall into place between now and then to continue our success. So we're going to talk about, and I'm going to kick it off, and then we'll break it out to 3 other presentations. But these are the goals that we as an organization have developed. And it wasn't just the executive leadership team, it was everybody at VPRA. Hey, what does good look like? We pushed back on each other. I think we were really honest in saying, oh, come on, that's not a good date. You can do it faster than that. And we're also honest with, don't put a goal out there that there's no way we're going to hit. So we've got a good balance of stretch, but not impossible. What we don't want to do is be here in November and say, well, there's no way we'll meet that. We're out. You've heard me say this before. We put these goals into place. What we're not going to do is make a bad business decision just to hit these goals. And we saw one last year in FY24 where we had set a goal. It did make sense after a few months to hit that, but we kept it and said, nope, we didn't hit that. But we're proud of the fact that we made the right decision. So we're going to go through what those goals look like. We continue to break them into 4 categories. This is what we've done for the last 3 years, because these are the main things that we feel we need to accomplish. First is ridership and revenue. If we don't grow ridership and revenue, and I say grow with an asterisk, we're really not fulfilling our mission. Long Bridge is our key project. It's really the backbone of everything we need to do to increase frequencies from 8 down to 7 up to 13. Additionally, we've got the other major projects that we've got to get completed, and they need to be completed by the time Long Bridge is done, because if Long Bridge gets done at 2030 and we high five and say, let's add frequencies, but these other projects aren't done, that's a big fail. And then the other category falls into organizational. I mean, we quite frequently forget that we're only 4.5 years old. And as Steve said earlier, we got here, 3 of us, and I asked the board chair at that point, hey, can you show me all the policies and procedures we have so I can read up on them? And she literally pointed to an empty bookcase and said, this is what you've got. So the fact that we've gone from tracking paid time off in Excel and running our finances in QuickBooks to where we are now, we can't lose sight of the fact that it's only 4.5 years and we've got a lot more work that we need to do. So that other category historically has been, what are we doing to continue to mature and evolve the organization? And so we'll talk about those 4 categories. Those are the 4 categories we're going to talk about. We'll go through each of the goals. I'll do ridership and revenue, and then I'll get the folks that actually have more ownership of those categories to brief them. That said, we talk a lot about ownership. Every goal we put in here, we're very careful that every person in the organization has a role in it. So if you work for the legal department, yes, you don't have a clear goal here, but if you're not getting agreements done on time, we're not getting these projects done on time. If you're doing right away, everybody's got an impact here. So it's important that we all as a group are rowing in the same direction to an article and focused on the same goal. And again, we look at these every month. Here's the sheet of our 26 organizational goals. I'm not going to read them to you because we'll go through them section by section. I'll kick it off with ridership and revenue. Historically, we have had the ridership and revenue goals linked because we don't want a situation where we can manipulate one to meet the other. Ridership and revenue, we've talked about that sweet spot. We want to be in a situation where we optimize that ridership and revenue. If we really wanted to hit a ridership goal, we could make fares $1 and then ridership would be through the roof. We'd probably get some riders that we definitely wouldn't have had otherwise, but the revenue wouldn't be hit and that wouldn't be what we're looking for. Additionally, if we price things very high, ridership would go way down and folks that were desperate would hop on the train. We would do well on revenue. Historically, we have had those two linked. This year, we are not going to do that. We are going to do it again next year is our plan. But this year, because of the service changes we've talked about, we just don't think that it's a good idea. We don't know what these service changes are going to be. As I said earlier, we're going to go from 8 trains down to 7. So that's a 12.5% reduction. We're hopeful that folks will ride other trains. Those trains may be Virginia trains, which will continue our ridership. They may be VPRA trains, which you don't see up there. They may be Amtrak trains, which you don't see up there. They may hop on these buses, which you don't see up there. So this year and this year only, we are proposing to not have those two linked. That said, we are going to watch it very closely. And if one's not going to get hit, we're not going to sacrifice it to hit the other one. And you all see these every month. So we'll continue to talk about them every year it goes forward. One thing I didn't say that I should have, and somebody texted me, I'm imagining that's what it is. Our goals go from October 1st to September 30th, with the exception of revenue and ridership. Those follow the state fiscal year. So that gives us, the state fiscal year ends in June. That gives us a couple months to get the numbers from Amtrak and have the books finalized. But other than that, our performance here is October to September. So revenue and ridership, we're setting a goal of 1.35 million riders and revenue of 82.7. You're going to ask, how does that compare to this year? Well, we're proposing to see a slight decrease in ridership and a slight decrease in revenue. And as I said, we're going to see about a 12.5% reduction in train service going from 8 to 7. We're going to work hard to capture and only have a 7% or so reduction in ridership and an 8% or so reduction in revenue. So service goes down 12.5%. We want to get most of that back through other Amtrak Virginia trains. We've talked a lot about this. There were folks in the organization, we're losing 12.5% of service. Let's bring these goals down 12.5%. We didn't think that was reasonable because we're working, as Jeremy talked about, to put trains in place so people can still go where they want to go. But these are what we settled on as an organization for goals for this coming fiscal year. So again, 7% reduction in ridership, a little bit higher reduction in revenue because at this point with the construction period, we're more concerned about keeping the riders and the revenue could take a little bit more of a hit. But that's our proposal going forward for ridership and revenue. We'll continue to track it every month. You'll see it in the ERs and we'll talk about it at the board meeting. We're comfortable that if we hit these numbers a year from now, we'll be in a good shape as the construction season starts. So any questions on that before I go to the next goal? All right, next is Long Bridge. We've talked about this. Long Bridge is our most important project, and I'll turn it to Mike and Ian. I think he's here to talk about Long Bridge. Thank you very much.
Well, Ian's coming up. Let me brag on him a little bit. We stole Ian from CSX through over 10 years, correct?
Yeah.
And we talked about King Commonwealth earlier today. There was a few years ago, there was 3 bridge strikes in the 1 month period of King Commonwealth. We found looking through the records that one of the engineers called out to make sure the bridge was safe was Ian Lang. So he obviously has experience in a corridor and not just making sure bridges are safe, but building bridges, building infrastructure. So we're very proud to have him on our team. He works for Shirlene Cleveland. So he's a VPRA employee. You've seen Shirlene before. We like to showcase, like to let you know who's working on these projects. So Ian's one of the main, we only have 3 people working on Long Bridge. You're one of them. So he's got great experience. We're proud to have him. And with that, I'm also smart enough to know that he knows more than me about building bridges. So I'm going to turn thumbs over to him. And we're going to go over these 3 milestones a little bit fun. The next slide, I think it's a little easier. So Ian, why don't we go ahead and I'll hand the clicker over to you.
Great. Thank you for that introduction, Mike. So first off, we're going to talk about Long Bridge North. And 80% of the critical path on Long Bridge North runs through Main Avenue, right? There's a railroad bridge double track today over Main Avenue. It will be a 4-track structure when it's all said and done, okay? So in order to build that, we need to get this temporary bridge across Main Avenue. So by September 30th next year, 2026, we're going to have that bridge in place is the goal. Again, once we have the temporary structure in place, then we can go about removing the existing bridge. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Second, complete Long Bridge North early work packages 1 through 3. That's consists of crash wall work, of selective tree clearing, as well as demonstration foundations that are done in order to conform the final design.
We have some great pictures coming up in the next slides to show this.
Yeah, we're also going to take a deep dive into the crash wall work too. That's ongoing today, and all that will be completed by April 1st. And then, last but not least, move to Long Bridge South and issue the notice to proceed for construction to Long Bridge Rail Partners no later than September 30th of next year. Okay, jumping back to that first goal. And that's the temporary bridge across Main Avenue. So on the left-hand picture here, you see the foundation construction in blue, the existing bridge kind of in the background there with an Amtrak and a CSX train on it. So we'll get the foundations in place. And then on the right-hand side, the blue new superstructure, which is the temporary spans across Main Avenue. This is important again, 80% of the critical path for the project runs through Main Avenue, okay? Once we get the temporary span up, then we can go about demolishing that whole bridge, okay? How we're gonna do that is we're actually gonna sever the bridge in half, right? That's a common through plate girder. We're gonna remove that middle section in order to make way for the permanent bridge. So that red section first has to come out right after we get the temporary spans over Main Avenue. All right, moving on to the early works package.
Any questions on that one? I just think it's really neat. You're cutting a bridge in half.
Yeah.
But we'd be perfectly safe.
Yes.
That's it's
We're changing traffic patterns. We actually showed earlier in the day, changing the traffic patterns of Main Lane. We can make that happen.
Yep. So jumping to the early works packages, last year, one of our goals was to advance design on 9 of them. 3 of them were advanced for construction. Okay. So these 3 crash wall work underneath Maryland Avenue overbuild, where we're increasing the thickness as well as the width of the crash walls in order to make them more robust. And then we also have selective tree clearing, and that's all done outside of the time of year restriction, right? There's a period of time during the year where we're not going to take down trees due to birds and bats, right? So we can take them down anytime outside of those restrictions. All of that will be to maintain project schedule. And then last, the third package is our demonstration foundations. We have drilled shafts, micro piles that are built and then tested. The testing data will then be used to inform final design, right? To tell us whether or not we need to go any deeper, whether we can pull our foundations a little more shallow, those sorts of things. From here, we'll jump into crash wall work. This work is ongoing. This is EWP1 or early work package, excuse me. This work is taking place north of Washington Channel and Main Avenue with the red box there that you see on the bottom left-hand corner. Today, there are 2 tracks that run underneath the Maryland Avenue overbuild, underneath the center bay. On the next slide, we'll take a look at the new configuration. But essentially, as tracks get closer to a bridge structure, they move closer to a pier, we need to make the crash walls more robust. Okay, there are crash walls there today protecting those piers, but we're going to make them higher and we're going to make them thicker. We're bringing them up to the current standards as we approach those. Kind of a fine point here. Purpose of crash walls is to limit damage to the overhead structure, right? We're not going to prevent an outright collision. But should a shifted load or a derailment take place in this area, we're better protecting those piers. Right, so this is proposed, the new configuration underneath the overbuild. This is a very similar view looking north. We have crash walls C, D, and E. These are all protecting the Maryland Avenue overbuild, which is a privately owned structure. And then we've got crash wall F and G on the far side, on the right rather, which are protecting DDOT structures, 12th Street Southwest and the 12th Street Expressway. Currently, we're working on crash wall D and F, and we'll get to some of those photos here, but that's the center pier between what will be track 5 and track 4. Right. So now, again, ongoing early works package construction. We've got a picture of crash wall D and crash wall F. D protects the overbuild. Crash wall F protects DDOT's 12th Street. And what they're doing here is they're installing reinforcing steel that will then be formed up, and then they'll place concrete around them in order to extend the height of this crash wall from about 7 feet to greater than 12 feet. Okay. Similarly, on crash wall F, they're using reinforcing steel from an elevated platform. On the left, crash wall D. This is a pump truck in the foreground on the left. And then you can see the formwork as well as the formwork reinforcement. They're getting prepared for a concrete placement. Concrete truck pulls up to the truck, and then it can disperse concrete up into the form system. Again, that's crash wall D. On the far side, in the background, you can see crash wall F. They are building the scaffold system in order to build the formwork, install the rebar. And then in the foreground, you see crash wall D, and that's actually a nearly completed bay. The concrete has been poured. You can kind of see the different color of concrete on the top. 5 added to that bay. But not quite in its final form, but getting pretty close. Here on the left-hand side, crash wall D. This is freshly placed concrete inside the form. Kind of looking down, it's kind of a different perspective, but you're on an elevated platform looking down at the new crash wall. And then crash wall D on the right-hand side, there's 3 bays with the added height. Moving to crash wall F, a little closer look at installing the elevated scaffolding system for workers to get on top of and install the formwork and reinforcing steel. And then we have a gentleman on the right-hand side who's actually sounding concrete. He's looking for any deformations, any spalls, anything that we need to repair on the existing. Got work that we extend the crash wall up, but we're also, while we're there, going to make sure that the existing crash walls are in good shape. So that's what he's engaged in there. All right, any questions on crash wall? If it's ongoing.
There's a question about the bridge that you're showing us. I guess, why are you just showing me like taking down part and building a temporary piece, right? That's not where we're stopping.
Correct. So this is just a milestone of getting that temporary, the shoe fly really in place. It's the next big piece that we need to get to.
Okay.
This will make,
Can I have, can you cut to the end? Can you like, give me a spoiler? Like what, we're gonna take out the temporary. What is it gonna look like when it's done?
so we're gonna put up the temporary, we have to make sure there's continuity of service.
Right.
Very clear on that. We can't, one point we're looking at accelerated bridge construction, bringing it in, without me shutting down CSX's north-south, entire north-south route along the East Coast. So we had to come up with an alternative, which is creating people to shoot fly a temporary track. As you can see here, and then we're gonna go back and we're gonna build a 4-track. It's gonna end up being a 4-track, once bridge structure through this area. It can be cut to the shapes. We're gonna end up with 4 tracks, 2 per passenger, as I think we were talking about earlier, 2 per passenger, 2 per bridge.
The existing bridge sits inside the footprint. In a way that you couldn't just add a track on either side, one on the east and one on the west. We had to remove existing. And to do that, we need to start out with building a shoe fly, essentially.
Okay, and the shoe fly has 1 track on it.
Correct. So the plan will be to install the shoe fly track to the westernmost area. We'll remove that section, the red section actually, and then we'll build a new permanent track in between the blue, the remaining existing track.
There's gonna be 2 tracks. You have the track here on the west side, and then I say cut the bridge in half. Eastern half of the bridge will still carry traffic.
Patty, I think they're just showing what's gonna happen in the next year.
Okay.
And one question, did Mike do the artwork on those walls?
Actually, that's free artwork. It's fantastic.
There's pretty straightforward. Any other questions?
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I guess I have to like be patient, but
We've got a bunch of renderings. Unfortunately, not the presentation, but that covered the entirety of this construction.
But to the engineering mind, this is a discrete project, and that's why you're keeping us on this way, right? Okay,
It needs to be done by this time next year.
okay.
Go ahead to the last one here, which is we're going to issue notice to proceed for construction to Longbridge South, which is the design builder is Longbridge Rail Partners, a joint venture of Track Trumbull, Fay, and Wagman by September 30th of 2026. And they have some documents to produce plans, that sort of quality, safety plans, that sort of thing, in order to tell us that they're ready to move into the construction phase.
So Ian, earlier today, we showed a video of the work going on with barges. So that work will inform this notice to proceed, the work that is going to happen after notice to proceed, correct?
That's right.
It's important. I'm glad you said that because sometimes when we think about a notice to proceed, there's a perception that there's no work happening now until the notice to proceed comes, but there's a lot of work leading to the notice to proceed.
Video said 150 feet, some of the piles go into the ground. That's going to help the engineers determine what the piles will be when they're driven in.
And what you see on the screen is a rendering of the new Long Bridge on the left, existing on the right. You see the weathering steel girders, as well as the granite clad pier face, which closely resembles the existing Long Bridge. What big thing that LBRP, Long Bridge Rail Partners, have been doing right now is coordinating with the signatories, Commission of Fine Arts, National Capital Planning Commission, on what the aesthetics is.
And this is a tight window. WMATA is then right next to that bridge. And then you have the 395 and 14th Street bridges over the Potomac just next to those. So it's very, and the bike ped bridge as well will be just next to the probably obscured by this pier.
Are they both going to be called Long Bridge when they're done?
As of now, well, the new Long Bridge and the current, the new Long Bridge and the current Long Bridge, we often refer to as the new Long Bridge.
Right.
The new 2-track structure.
That's the naming right.
I want to say
That's a really good point. I hadn't even thought about that.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next set of goals. Thanks, Ian.
Thank you, Ian.
So, I'm gonna tackle a couple of these, and I think, Rob's also gonna come up and talk about New River Valley. So, you've heard from Jeff Peltier. He covers our Northern Virginia projects and Neil, who was down here earlier, working on some of these. Talked earlier about Alexandria Fort Track. So phase two, what is phase two for Alexandria Fort Track? That is when we'll build the new Fort Track itself in that area. Remember, we had that picture that showed where the Fort Track used to be. We'll build that and also build the RO interlocking up by Longbridge Park. RO interlocking is for those who have been to, we've had some events at Longbridge Park. That's right before Longbridge South is. So that is, so yeah, big fun. Began construction for Alexandria Fort Track no later than March 30th. There will be some phase one work that'll happen even before then. It'll happen in the November timeframe. But we want to track very important, starting that new Fort Track, begin construction of that Fort Track no later than March 30th. The shoe fly. Ian mentioned the shoe fly. We've talked to you before about a shoe fly for the bypass. We've presented on that a few times. The sub base for that will be started, will be completed no later than August 31st, so a year from now, 2026. Also, we're going to partner with CSX to advertise the construction bid for Franconia Lord third track. We haven't talked about that as much. We haven't talked about that much at all today. DJ, I think briefly talked about during the executive director report, but that is 6 miles of third track from Franconia area. And right now, the third track goes all the way down from Alexandria to Franconia. We'll continue that another 6 miles down toward the Lord Road area. And then, Rob, if I need any help here, you'll let me know. Complete platform, the concrete, please complete the platform concrete in New River Valley no later than June 30th. We showed you some pictures earlier, how some work was started. Here is Alexandria Fort Track. So I mentioned, if you can see in the red, new Fort Track construction will be on the east side. So Union Station is to the right-hand side of the page. If that makes sense. And also, when I say RO interlocking, I just want to say Roslyn because I believe it stands for Roslyn Operator. It's not in Roslyn, though. For those who know Northern Virginia, Roslyn is up where all the tall buildings are. This is about a mile or two south up near Longbridge Park.
Hey, Mike, where's CP Virginia?
What?
Where's CP Virginia?
Not in Virginia.
In the district, that's
In
right.
the district, right. Virginia Avenue. That's what it stands for. And here's the bypass again. This is you see the purple here. So the shoe fly is actually to change sides of the track. You see that. So you have the south shoe fly tracks will be on the west side. The north shoe fly tracks will be on the east side. And here's the Franconia Lorton third track that shows that extension of the third track down to just south of Lorton Station. And New River Valley, I do have an expert here, Rob, who's been a bird dog in this for us with Norfolk Southern. In fact, you're going to go down there again?
Leave right after this meeting.
Meeting is going down again. And you can see the work for the platform, see the new platform. So we're tracking that as an organizational goal no later than June 30th, 2026. You can see work has already begun. And it's our duty to build a pocket track in the platform to get off Norfolk Southern's main line. That's important. When you see that platform being built, you really see that milestone. So any questions on those goals?
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bring Natasha up. Natasha is another one of our employees. She's handling a lot of her core mission, which is program management, and also she's being handling asset management. I'm going to brag on her a little bit too. She worked for the MBTA in Boston. For those who know, that's one of the nation's major transit agencies. They run commuter rail, all different types of rail. Light rail. Yeah. So she came to us from them, and you've been in the industry for dozens of years. Works with my friends in Chicago. Don't hold that against me. And she's going to talk to us. She's leading our new asset management. Jeremy talked about this a little bit earlier, and I think it came up a couple of times. So we are undertaking some responsibility for various assets we'll be receiving. So we have to track this. We don't want to come to a point where all of a sudden asset is out of date and, oh gosh, what are we going to do about it? We need to track it beforehand. And I know VPRA and others do this. This is common in industry. But since it's new to us that we are We have taken on some assets, we'll be taking on more when we complete some of our, some of the survey work that CSX has actually been completing in some deeds for some properties in Northern Virginia, and also the Manassas line. As you all know, we own the Manassas line as well. We're working with VPRA on that. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Natasha.
Thank you, Mike, and I'm happy to be at the board to present to you about this. So as Mike mentioned, any organization that owns physical assets really needs to understand the totality of their assets, their age, their condition, manage their life cycle costs, so operations and maintenance costs, and then understand when they've reached the end of their life cycle and need to be replaced or disposed. So we have a couple goals that you can see on the slide specific to asset management. We're going to develop an asset management policy. That'll be the umbrella under which all of our enterprise asset management will reside. That'll include a framework for how we'll go through that, as well as looking to procure an enterprise asset management tool. So there's a difference between asset management and enterprise asset management. Asset management is essentially daily inspections, daily report. So a lot of what our operators and maintainers do for us. And enterprise asset management, the goal of that is to look at the big picture. So it's not only a repository for our asset management information and reports, it's also giving us the ability to manage large fixed assets like bridges and culverts, as well as asset management systems that have components like rail track ties and ballasts, like our track bed is made up of. And so it's essential for organizations like us to understand the assets that we own, to maintain them in a state of good repair, and have confidence in our financial plan to understand and manage those capital and maintenance needs. I assume you are all aware we own about 400 miles of rail corridor. I have to look at my notes for this, but 145 miles from DC to Petersburg, 24 miles on the M line, 164 miles from Doswell to Clifton Forge, another 75 miles on the S line, and then multiple facilities along the way. Our freight railroad partners are still the operators and maintainers for our port. So we have started to develop our enterprise asset management program. We created an asset management strategy that was reviewed and approved by the ELT. That included the creation of an asset management working group who meets on a regular cadence. And we're looking to hire an asset manager who will lead the development of the policy and the framework. And then we have also posted a request for information, or RFI, for an asset management tool for what the industry, the things that are available in the industry. We posted that on the 4th, and that is due. The responses are due September 4th, and we will use that as a basis to finalize our policy and framework, and then ultimately build out requirements to select a tool. And I think that. Any questions on asset management?
I have a quick question, Natasha. So if the railroads are responsible for maintaining the asset that we own, what would our role look like in terms of asset management for something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they're going to do the day-to-day maintenance and report to us and provide all of that data to us, which they're currently doing on the M line. And we have some of that information as well for our other segments. But the other thing that they share with us is a capital needs assessment. So bigger projects like replacing switches and replacing track, and then we have to be able to plan for those costs through our capital program. We have to also evaluate whether or not we truly need to make that investment at that time. We have to make sure our rail partners don't end up with a gold-plated railroad, on our dollar. So that's why we're doing an enterprise asset management approach, because it's the capital planning and the maintenance planning and looking at it over the lifetime of our assets.
All in one. Got it. Thank you.
But eventually this becomes VPRA's responsibility. And I say that not in that we're going to hire people to go out and maintain, but we'll contract with CSX, Norfolk Southern, or someone else to do the actual maintenance parts. And to the point earlier, that's when we have to make the determination of how we manage, how we maintain the track, and heat orders be a big part of that.
Okay.
So you use the term own, and you're showing Norfolk, Newport News, 95 corridor, Lynchburg. I thought that we didn't actually own it. We work with the railroads. They own it. They maintain it. That's throwing me that you've used the word own.
So on the RFMP corridor, so DC to Petersburg, we will own the east side, south of Franconia, the west side, north of Franconia.
New stuff that you're doing, the new projects that you're doing in the 95.
We will own the east side, south of Franconia, the west side, north of Franconia. You're correct, though, that CSX is the operator of record with the STB, Surface Transportation. We filed a statement of main transaction. So they'll be the operator. And our agreements with them, and Chair, that was a very good question because our agreements differ on the railroads. With CSX, they will maintain that corridor until there's full separation of passenger and freight. As we talked about earlier today, once we construct Long Bridge and Alexandria Fort Track and VPRA reconstructs L'Enfant, we'll have an 8-mile section where it's separated.
You own that. You own the new things we're building.
Not just the new things. We're going to own the whole 2 tracks. So in Alexandria, for instance, CSX is actually constructing where there's space to construct, which is in their side of the corridor. When they're done with that, they're going to deed us the 2 tracks in the west.
Okay.
So, but right now, we actually are, we talked to before about the group about survey work. Survey work is done for the first 5 Virginia segments, and we are close, Mr. Westman, within the next month or so, finalizing the deeds where we will own land and track, again, east side, south of Franconia, west side, north of Franconia on the CSX corridor. So we will own half, they'll own half. In a Manassas line, we own the whole from milepost 9.25 to milepost 34.
We just purchased that.
We own that, and then VRE, we have the land which they're purchasing from us from milepost roughly 34 to 37, get to Broad Run. So, and that gives us, especially with the talk and Chair talked about earlier, with the mergers and acquisitions that may be happening in the industry, that gives us a sense of certainty. And we negotiated strong rights. It wasn't just, hey, for a certain period of time, you can operate trains. Those rights stay throughout transactions mergers. And we talked about that during negotiations, that we needed the strongest rights of ownership in case there is a merger and acquisition. And we didn't know 4 or 5 years ago that these things may come up, but it's always a possibility in the rail industry. So yeah, so that's a good, I'm glad you raised that question because we will own the new Long Bridge because it happens to be on the west side. We will own the Franconia bypass because that is a passenger only structure. But also in that area in Franconia, south of where the bypass ends, we're going to own the track. If there's 3 tracks on the ground, we'll own at least 1. And then we own land next to it. So if we need to construct a 4th track in the future, we don't have to say, mother, may I, and pay ungodly amounts of money to CSX to construct 4th track. We will have the right to construct that 4th track. So we own land and railroad. In some cases, if there's 4 tracks, we'll own 2. If there's 3 tracks, we'll own 1. There's some exceptions like Ashland where it's split and we're never going to build a 3rd track through there. So we own each party owns 1. If you're familiar with Ashland, you know why I'm saying that. So it's a good question. And I know it can be confusing because different railroads, the Manassas line, a 2 to 6 year period, we're already almost up in year 1, like Mr. Westerman. A 2 to 6 year period where Norfolk Southern will maintain. And somewhere in that period, we have to determine if we're going to take maintenance, Norfolk Southern, or another option could be some of our partners here at the table, such as VPRA.
Say coming out of Norfolk. Who owns that?
So that's,
Norfolk is Norfolk Southern.
yeah, so if you look at the map where,
Yeah.
with just the purple color, we don't own any of that. The only stuff that we are
Okay.
owning is the stuff that's in that yellow orange color. But you're right, that's passenger service, but we don't own that exactly as you described. We have agreements with CSX and Norfolk Southern to run over those.
Okay, so I see that. Those were my questions. Lynchburg, Roanoke, Norfolk, Newport News. Okay, thank you. So we have a blend.
Yes, it is.
Just a quick question, and maybe DJ, you answered this, but on the, like, for major maintenance projects, do we have third-party inspectors on the ground, or are we letting CSX engineers certify the work? How is that being handled?
So that's one of the things that we're gonna figure out in the next year. We expect there to be a blend of our maintainers providing information and details to us and us having an independent inspection program or approach, because I think it's like verifying and validating.
Especially for major projects, I'm sure.
Yeah.
when we have a planning and engineering bench, so we can go to a Jacobs HDR, what WSP. One of the items in there is to help us with look over the shoulder of the freight railroad to make sure, hey, independent inspector, are you truly doing that? So we'll make sure that remains on the criteria for a bench. Great questions.
This is all just important. I will say is that like, especially our enterprise asset management, I think for us as the board, this is incredibly important because of the fact that there's plenty of examples of other transit agencies, passenger rail operators getting to be on a state of good repair. And then when you get to the point where it's enterprise risk, because it becomes so expensive to even, once you get below that threshold, it becomes prohibitively expensive to maintain the level of service. And so that's why I think it's really important that we have this, because of the fact that we need to maintain that we're always with our assets above that, because once we drop below it, then the game is up and we can't offer that kind of product.
When
Well, the
we
Northeast
get into a
Corridor.
maintenance backlog, it'll be very difficult to get out. You can't allow yourself to get into that.
That's why keeping a catalog of where we are and all this stuff is so important, just because there's so many examples of other systems getting below that and then it just doesn't work.
Steve? Yes, add to what Darren said, in our financial plan today, we have estimates for maintenance. We are not 100% comfortable with those numbers because we're still developing this process, as Natasha said earlier, but we've embedded that it's part of the financial plan because we don't want to build a bunch of new stuff. We own all of those corridors or half of those corridors or the whole corridor where it's yellow or orange. I'm not sure the color. But we don't want to get to where those older assets that we own, all of a sudden we get to 2030, a bunch of new assets and we can't new service because we can't maintain those.
I think that's it. And I'll hand it back over to our hearing executive director.
Thank you both.
I think that's obviously leadership.
Great goals, really great presentation, great questions. So with that, we are about to wrap up. And I just want to take a minute to acknowledge the fact that it is both Steve Pittard's and Rich Dalton's last VPRA board meeting. And we are so very grateful for both of you. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think Steve has 35 years with.
33.
And I think Rich has at least 25 with VRE.
16 at VRE
Okay.
and then 35 total. So I worked on the private industry side, but managing passenger and freight operations, building railroads, doing all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, 35 years total.
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge that you both have brought a wealth of expertise to benefit this board and VPRA. And on behalf of the board, we're very grateful. We wish you both the best.
Appreciate it.
With that, I will open it up. We're going to give everybody a little bit of time back this afternoon. But before we adjourn this meeting, are there any other questions or discussion to be had? Wonderful.